from here, the next step where I go when I'm writing an action sequence is I start to look at this sort of thing that we learn as a writer, the narrative flow of a sequence. And you start to ask yourself questions like, what is the point of the sequence? And the point should not be to entertain with a blow-by-blow. The blow-by-blow is a side thing. What is this scene conveying? Is your main purpose here to advance the plot where a character dies? Is your main sequence here to show your main character being resourceful in a time of great stress and danger? Is your sequence here to add a level of danger and threat to the world? And all of these things are things a fight sequence can achieve, and I think are vital, particularly fight sequences, that you consider when you're putting them in, because they'll each have a different tone.
So like in Ally of Law and the other Mistborn books, you used a lot of the fight sequences to give a crash course on the magic system.
Yes, I did. That's a very common use of a fight sequence for me. And I frequently use them for what I just said. Let's show how resourceful the characters are. So we can show a character in their area of expertise being an expert. Ally of Law is a great example of this. And you can compare how the tones of the fight sequences. You can see where I'm trying to be illustrative of the magic and where I'm trying to say, here is why this character is very competent. You've seen them be a fish out of water. Now we're dumping them in the pond and they're the big fish. And it's therefore achieving character sympathy and empathy, hopefully, if I'm doing it right. We do still do some blow-by-blow in that. And the blow-by-blow can be fun. And an action book is going to, you're going to want to have some of the action be fun. But you sit down and say, what is fun in a book? For me, in an action sequence, what is fun is showing the characters making connections, using their resources in interesting ways, and being clever. If they're a clever character. If they're not a clever character, advancing the character in some other way. And so you'll see me use fight sequences in the Mistborn books for a lot of different things. There's a lot of fighting in the Mistborn books. In some of them, it is to convey a sense of tone for the period. To make the combat in some of these books are more like dances. These kind of beautiful, flowing, one-on-one sparring matches in the Night and the Mist were intended to evoke a sort of sense of this is a wondrous magic system. This is wire fu without hopefully the wires being visible. This is elegant and graceful, and these are elegant, graceful creatures who have come into conflict with one another. And so I'm trying to achieve certain tones with these fight sequences. This is very important for you as a writer to start paying attention to for all of the sequences that you're doing. What is this sequence achieving? What is its goal? And it shouldn't just be one thing. Advancing the plot is usually not enough. What is the tone of this scene going to do? And fight sequences are a place where people often just kind of say, okay, now we're in the fight sequence, so we'll show them fighting. And that's what the scene is about. I find that the fight sequences are far more engaging if you say, no, what's the tone of this, and how can I make the fighting enhance the tone of this fight sequence? Desperation? Or is it competence? Or is it, misery and hopelessness? There is no fighting back. So, questions on fight sequences?
Pat Rothfuss recently did a post blasting authors that change point of view in fight sequences multiple times. When's the appropriate time to change point of views if you wanted to?
Your call. There are so many different styles on this. Pat is a big fan of Tad Williams. Is one of the big influential authors, I believe, in his writing style and career. And Tad was a master of the quick viewpoint swap. You'll get, in really great sequences of his, you'll have like 5 different viewpoints. And the way he cuts them, go study what he does. Other authors, like Robert Jordan, did not cut viewpoints nearly as often in their books. So, yeah. Make your decision. What kind of tone do you want? Quick, frantic cuts give a sense of speed to a book. And, well, speed is the wrong term. A sense of pacing, like bam, 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 bam. If you're cutting scenes very quickly. But if you do that too much, the reader gets lost. So, it's a balance. Other questions about fight scenes? You're all experts now. Good. No, I just said stuff that didn't make that much sense, so you're confused.
How do you go about gauging whether you've gone too far, blow by blow, or too little?
Alpha readers.
Yeah.
Yeah. Usually alpha readers, because that balance is one of those ones that I have to have someone read it and see if they get bored.
Do you think kind of looking into the psychology of kind of combat and fighting, but also
Yeah.
going back to like your earlier comments?
Oh, I think that's definitely, if you've got a character that can do that, it can be a great way to make you want to make the fight scene. Here's the thing, guys. Every scene should do something different and cool. You should be trying to do something different and cool with every scene. And from newer authors, I read a lot of filler scenes. Like they're trying to get to the something cool and awesome. Well, as a writer, you should be able to turn any scene into something cool and awesome. If it's not, set it someplace interesting. Or have them doing something interesting while the scene is progressing. There are lots of, in television, there are lots of masters of doing this. You'll set a scene in an unexpected location, and even though it's just talking heads going back and forth, because they're watching the Shark Tank at the time, and kind of, their conversation is therefore reflecting kind of the nature of sharks, you suddenly have this great underlying message for the sequence. So set it someplace interesting. Have them do something interesting. Just have something interesting and different happen in every scene if you can. And, when you sit down and say, I'm going to write my fight sequence, say, what different can happen in this fight sequence? We're going to have a generic chase sequence. Okay, where can we put them that the chase would be more interesting? A chase through the cages at a zoo where you're jumping over partitions and from the lion's den to this is a different chase sequence than we're running down more generic streets. Beginning, the parkour thing from the beginning of one of the more recent James Bond films, chase sequence, is a great example of this. It could have just been him chasing a guy down a street, because there's lots of films that do that. And instead, they had this really cool parkour thing, that is urban climbing and stuff. And so, ask yourself, what can my fight sequence do differently? Where can we set it? What hindrances can we give to the characters, or advantages can we give to the characters? And try and do this with all of your scenes, if you can.
How do you find the differences between large-scale battles and smaller, like duels versus like armies?
Boy, that's gonna be a measure of tone. For me, when I'm writing armies, I go for often the sense of I am the small and minuscule thing in the center of this big machine that's crushing against another machine. And you give a sense of that through the character's eyes by just having them, they're trying to stay alive. Most people in wars are just trying to stay alive. It's a war between their training and their survival instinct. And if you show that inside of them, that can be as interesting a conflict as anything else.
How do you make it feel awesome and powerful? I remember when I was reading The Wheel of Time,
Yeah.
first loved that, I was just how awesome it felt, this limitless power. Even though when you actually compare what was happening,
Right.
In that book with the magic, it wasn't that much more awesome than things that happen in lots of other books
Right.
with magic. But it just felt awesome. I don't know there's necessarily just
I think it's use of character, personally. It's use of character. If the characters, the way they're responding to it, makes it feel awesome, it will feel awesome. I can't... This is one of those things you're going to have to experiment with on your own. And it's a really hard one, because you will never be able to read your sequence and feel the same awesomeness, because you know the sequence. You can't feel that sense of wonder and awe because you wrote it. Unless maybe you hit yourself on the head and forget about it.
Do it.
Yeah, I often wonder, what would the teenage Brandon think of Brandon's books now? But, yeah. Getting into specific questions like that, how is it done? It's done by a master writing a story where characters are passionate and are real and feel alive, and we see the world through their eyes, and it brings us in and gives us the sense that it's real. And then we can feel a sense of wonder, because if it's not real to us, we can't. All right, let's talk. Anything else on fight scenes? this is really a matter of taking a lot of the things that we've talked about before and doing them really well. I think the takeaway from this should be to remember that a blow-by-blow is usually not going to be that fun. You're going to want to have like a little blow-by-blow, and then you're going to want to have thoughts and emotions. But stay away from, as I've warned you, see, this is the thing, stay away from, I punched him. Now I pontificate on it. I punched him. Now I pontificate on it. Make sure you're making it appropriate to the tone. Because I punch him, I pontificate is really not that any more interesting than I punch him, I kick him. I punch him, I kick him. And so make the goals of the character vital. What are they trying to do? That's one I should have mentioned earlier. What are they trying to achieve? And in a book, you can show as they slowly try to achieve their goal in the fight. If their fight sequence is just, I'm keeping this person alive, you build a sense of progression into that. You show them trying and almost failing or failing at the end or almost failing several times. You build it like you would any little plot structure. And by the end of it, you should have achieved or failed in the character's goal.